Hello everybody, Jose Rodriguez here. As you are very well aware, I am in love with my EcoTank 8550 from Epson. It's a very capable printer. More or less, it's categorized as an all-in-one because it contains a built-in scanner. It can also print on discs that are printable, of course. It can do copying. It can do copy directly to print. And of course, it has Wi-Fi capabilities. But most of all, even though it is not considered a photo printer, it can print amazing photographs. Let me show you really quick before we actually get to the subject of this video what it can do. It is a dye ink printer with a pigment black ink that comes into play whenever you choose a matte media. But basically it is intended to be used with shiny papers, such as this luster paper. And you can see how gorgeous. Come on. There is no fault to this image, and it is basically printed on a printer that uses only 5 basic colors. It's amazing the gamut that you get from that printer. What about fancy high-end art papers? Well, here you go. And as you can see, it is nearly 100% match. Of course, I had to use the manufacturer's ICC profiles for this paper here, but I had to make my own for this one. And it's a slightly bit different, but you know, as long as you don't compare the two together, although they are extremely close. But I want you to look and see if you see any kind of marks or marring, any kind of defects. None whatsoever. All right, so let's put this aside. Let's get to the meat of this video. Now, most Epson dye ink printers, most Canon dye ink printers have internal waste ink pads. When those waste ink pads become saturated, in other words, the counter that is ticking away every time you run a cleaning cycle, especially on a Canon printer, which is usually going to do that prior to printing if you didn't print for a week or so, right? So here's what happens when those pads get full, at least by the counter. They may not be physically actually saturated, but they are declared full. The printer stops working. You have no option but to take it to a repair shop. And they're going to look at you and say, I don't want to do this job. They have to dismantle the whole printer, remove the internal pads. It's a mess in there. They have to clean. They have to put new pads. If they can even find them, they may not be available through Canon. You may be able to get them, say, from a Chinese source. And then once they are installed and the whole printer is reassembled, and hopefully nothing wrong will occur when they try to restart it, they have to then reset the counters back to zero. And for that functionality, they have to have access to a Canon server. Epson, on the other hand, some of these printers can be reset, can have their counters reset to zero with the so-called WIC tool. It's a software. Again, you buy a serial code and you enter that code and it will reset the counters, but you're still dropping or dumping ink into those pads. So what you really want, this is the key. What you really want is a printer that has user replaceable waste ink cartridges. Why don't every single printer offer you that? Really, basically it's a death warrant to like a Canon printer when those pads become saturated. So you need a printer that has a user replaceable waste ink cartridge. XP15000 from Epson has that. EcoTank 8550 has that as well. We're going to concentrate on that. I did a previous video in the past demonstrating that when the cartridge is declared almost full, like 80% full, in other words, any day now is going to overflow. It's not really overflowing. I took it out. I actually waited prior when it was brand new and when it was at 80%, and it had gained about 10 grams of weight. So I figure about 10 ml of liquid is still inside. Now, ink is made out of a glycol type mixture, so it doesn't really evaporate that much. It does evaporate a little bit because the water portion will evaporate eventually, depending how well sealed that cartridge is. But so I figured, okay, it gained 10 grams of weight. That's 10 ml. So I took a syringe, just like this, filled it up with 10 grams or 10 ml of water, and injected it. And I'm looking at the actual pads as I am injecting 10, 10, 10, 10. Each time I injected, I added 10 grams of ink. And eventually, when I did this 5 times, in other words, I had injected, even though 80% really meant 10 ml of waste ink had entered the pads, I went well beyond that. I added 5 times that amount. So basically, it's the same as if I had added 60 total ml of liquid. Finally, I began to see a wet condition on the top of the pads. Imagine that. So these cartridges have a lot more capacity. But how can I take advantage of that if the silly cartridge has a chip, right? So I either have to replace the chip, you can buy those, or use a resetter that is also available to reset the chip and then reinstall that cartridge back into the printer. You'll get another run. This is what I am doing currently right now. This is on my second run. Now, I am going to finish this and I'm going to go over to the printer and I'm going to show you the process in which I add water to that cartridge. I'm going to replace it with a new one. So I will take that cartridge, I'm going to add however many loads of 10 as I can, fit into that until the pads become wet. In other words, it's not going to overflow if just the surface of the pad becomes wet. So how many cycles? If each cycle, in other words, from supposedly empty to full or near full equals about 10 to 12 ml of ink, how many times can I do this? Resetting the chip and reinstalling it and then going through the process of generating waste ink, as the printers do, before it's dangerous. You see, how many lives, like a cat, can I get out of that cartridge? In other words, remove it, reset the chip, put it back in without doing anything else. How many cycles can I get away with before it's basically, okay, you really need to stop now? And when it gets to that point, you have two choices. Well, you can buy a new cartridge or replace the pads, which at this point they're saturated with ink. You can even rinse them and dry them. Or just buy a set of pads and then insert those pads, put the cover back on it. You've, of course, already reset your chip and you put that cartridge back in the printer. You're saving about $15 every time you do this. Okay, every time you do this. And, any amount of money you can save. Remember, this is about my channel. It's about refilling and saving you money. So any amount of money you can save is a blessing when it comes to photo printing at home. And also, you don't want to send these to the landfill every time. It's really not even a fifth or sixth full, and you're dumping it already. So we're going to go to the printer. I'm going to remove that existing cartridge and I am going to weigh it. But first I'm going to weigh an empty one, okay? And we're going to figure out the difference in weight and that'll tell us how much ink exists in that waste ink cartridge that's currently in the printer. First of all, let's go ahead and weigh an empty one. So here is an empty one. I have my scale here. You have to trust me with my results as I tell them to you. So we are 0, 0. And the empty weighs 115 grams. So let's write that down. 115 grams. And we'll save this as EcoTank Waste Ink. So we're doing this live. So bear with me. We'll save this to the desktop so we can find it easily. And that is it. All right, so we got 115 grams of total weight. And we're going to install this in our printer right now. Let me go ahead and remove the used one. That's the one that we're going to sacrifice and use to see how much more water we can add to it. We'll take a peek at the top condition of the pads as well to see what we have. If it's already soaked, then maybe twice is the max you can go. We'll see. So to remove it, you basically remove this lid and slide it to the left. It's a little bit tight. There we go, like that. Okay, so now we have the used one. We're going to install the new one. It's going to tell us that it's not installed, and we're going to say yes it is, and done. Processing, and we are good to go. So last night I actually looked at this, and it was about 90% from full, basically declared full. So remember, 115 was the original weight of the empty one. 138 grams. So 138 grams. And because I am not a whiz at math on my head, I'm going to need my calculator. And we're going to go from 138, I believe, minus 115. We have 23 grams of extra weight. So this is a second cycle. So that tells me that it took possibly, 11 and a half grams every time I reset it. It's not exact. Okay. This is not, rocket science. This is approximately. So 23 grams is the amount of weight it has gained. And this is the second so-called cycle where I reset the chip and I reinstalled it in the printer. And up to now, it's up to about the same level of fullness as it previously was when I reset it that first time. So I figure 12 grams maximum per cycle. So let's see how much ink or how much water we can add. First of all, we got to take this top off. So that's going to be a little difficult because it's got these tabs. And I'm going to go ahead and try to do that as well as I can. I might need a screwdriver. I'll be right back. Okay, so I used the spatula just to pry it off and finally got it off. So here's a cover. You don't really need this cover really to run it. You can leave it as is. So here are the pads. And you can see this pad here, completely dry. This one here, if I touch it, I get no ink. It looks black, but I really get no inks. The last time I did this area here looked full of color. You can see the color there. So this pad, even though pretty soon it'll declare itself as being saturated, it's not really saturated yet. So we have already run 2 cycles. The original cycle, which added about 11 grams of weight. The second cycle, which again has added another 11 or so grams of weight. Now here is the chip. We have a resetter right here that we can use to reset that chip back to 0. So it'll act as if it's empty. In other words, as if it had fully clean, brand new pads, which of course are also available. You might be wondering, from who? Rick Johnson. Rick Johnson has all of this paraphernalia available on his eBay store. The same store where you buy the CLI 42 modified cartridges. Now, this is not a commercial for Rick Johnson, although I love supporting small businesses. He makes all of this available for you so your life is simpler. And you don't really have to deal with unknown, let's just say foreign dealers. He is located in California here in the USA, so no issues. He has a record 100% satisfaction with everything he has sold. So keep that in mind. Links are available on my video descriptions. So here we go. Let's go ahead and weigh it now with the lid off. I just want to keep track of the weights as we go. $128. So basically that lid weighs 10 grams. Isn't that something? All right. So the lid by itself is 10 grams. So what we need to do is we're going to inject ink into that port. That is the intake port. Let's assume we already reset the chip. Basically, the resetter looks like this. You see that? Set of pins. You have to align them visually. It's a little bit difficult to do, but once you get it aligned, it will then reset that chip. You'll get a green signal on your resetter. Now, some other types of maintenance cartridges cannot just be reset and reinstalled. These you can. No issues whatsoever. So let's go ahead and load 10 ml of water. That's about right. And insert that in there like so. And we're going to inject that water directly into the cartridge. What I am going to do eventually with these, I'm going to go ahead and wash these pads out. I'm also going to, while I am doing that, I'm going to reinstall the pads that I got from Rick Johnson. To test, I'm just going to touch the top of the sponge. I get a little bit, but it's not wet. So that would be a third reset and reinstall, you know what I mean, cycle. I think this is going to be pretty good. So far, let's just say $15, $30, $45 we've already, well, $30 we saved because we bought the first one for $15. So like I said, any kind of money I can save, I'll definitely go for that. And inject. And we're looking at the top of that sponge. You want to do it slowly so you don't get a false positive. Okay? Get a little bit of black because that was there in the beginning. That would be how many now? I lost track. Uh-oh. One time. So that would be 4 runs. 4 runs. 10 ml again. And maybe I should be doing 11 ml. I don't know. But again, this is not a super scientific test, but one that will basically tell you if you're being basically scammed by the companies here, because this cartridge is not going to overflow. All right, so we are still got some right there. We got still a pretty dry upper portion of the sponge. That is 5 cycles already, folks. So you have installed a new one, you reset it once, twice, 3, 4 times. 5 times, put it back in, and now you're going to reset it again. Can we get 6 lives out of this? Maybe. Again, I have no idea what's going to happen here. It's getting pretty heavy. Let's see how much it weighs. It's 158 grams. A little bit of dampness, but not really an overflow condition. Wow. All right. At some point, I have to start getting a flood effect on top of the sponge. Nothing yet. Now, don't get me wrong. I really do not recommend you do this 8 times. 8 times would be 8 times $15. That's how much you're going to save by doing that. You haven't even replaced the pads. The more liquid you have in there, the more difficult it will be for the system to inject waste ink into this. So you may want to stop, say, about the 5th cycle, because that might be a little bit overdoing it. We're going to weigh this and see. The original weight was, let's see, let's look that up. So the original weight was 138. We removed the lid, it went down to 128. Now we have to weigh it to see how much heavier it has become. It's 187. So I'm going to subtract that. 187. So 187 minus 127. Yep. 187 minus 127, 60. So we have gone 8 full cycles now. So the first 2, and then we added the 6 times 10 ml. I really don't recommend you go beyond that. I'm having a bit of a worry because I'm getting a little bit of a leak here. So again, like I said, if this is way oversaturated, like it is obviously right now, the printer may have a problem injecting the waste inks. So let's just go ahead and stop here. I mean, for sure, we can get 8 cycles and still be just barely damp on the top. Now, would I trust this back in my printer? That's another question. You see, because you may have more pressure, in other words, more liquid weight here that may start to sort of back leak into the printer. You don't want that to happen. So we'll stop at this point. Amazing. I was able to get that many lives out of this print. One more, it would be like a cat. 9 lives. But we're going to stop here because this is clearly overdoing it at this point. So what I am going to do is I'm going to replace those pads with new ones, and then we'll reset the chip, and this cartridge can be put back in its box. And the next time I need to really go through this, will the printer outlive this? I hope so. The next time that we need to replace it, then I'll be ready to do so. So thank you again. Remember, you can find all of these supplies on my video descriptions. Rick Johnson has an eBay store where he sells pre-modified CLI, and I mean perfectly pre-modified and flushed, ready to be used with the best plugs and the best clips. Again, buy a couple of those sets because that will save your hide when you're dealing with refilling your CLI 42s on your Pro 100. Even if you have a Pro 200, he has something for you as well as many other items, including the same system for the XP15000 from Epson, as well as I believe the Canon G620 series, which is a tank printer and also has an internal waste ink tank that is user replaceable. And that is the key to a printer lasting at least to its capabilities, to its mechanical lifespan, and not prematurely dying just because the internal pads are full. That is ridiculous. All right, so thank you once again. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. And as always, happy printing. Bye-bye, everyone.